Hey guys, welcome. For this episode of Ivy Faith Stories, we have two wonderful pillars of the Ivy community with us. They're currently members of the Sharston community, and they've been there since the beginning. But even prior to Sharston, they've been attending Ivy since 1974. And that was also the year that they've been married. And so I know Nick's like thinking about what's the next big anniversary present he's going to get Natalie. I believe I'm reading his mind. Um, but Nick and Natalie Hands, thank you so much for your time and thanks for being here.
Yeah, very welcome. Yeah.
So let's get straight
You go
into it. I mean,
first.
this is Ivy Faith story. So could you give me a brief summary of how and why you became a Christian? And let's start with Natalie.
Okay. Well, I became a Christian when I was 17. I had been going to a Catholic school. That was my upbringing. Though my parents weren't Catholic, they sent me to the school because I think it was the nearest to my father. I'm sorry, my father came from Ukraine, so his kind of way of celebrating was very much like the Orthodox Church. So they sent me to a Catholic school to be something similar. And so I went to the Catholic school, and I loved hearing the stories about Jesus when I was little. And I used to have a long walk to school, and I would often think, oh, isn't it fantastic? Jesus was once my age. And I really loved the thought that I could be walking to school and talking to him. And then as I grew up, I kind of got on with other things in life and got distracted and really thought that I couldn't keep up the traditions and I wasn't religious and I couldn't really see God anymore. So I kind of rejected the whole thing. And then when I was 17, I met some friends who I got to know, and they invited me to church, and I came along to church, and they spoke about, after the church, all the youth got together, and they were all talking about Jesus. And I'm thinking, crikey, they actually know him. They know this person, Jesus. And I thought, and how do they know him? And I was really kind of quite fascinated. And then when a friend was taking me home one night, she said, would you like to be a Christian, Natalie? And I said, yes, I would, but, I'll get there one day, because in my mind, it was something I had to kind of work up to. And then she told me that, no, you can accept Jesus in your heart at any time. And she just led me in a prayer of repentance, which is just saying sorry to God, really, for me being in control of my life and allowing him to be in control, which I prayed that prayer, and I cried, and I felt this incredible joy. And she said, no, remember to tell somebody. So I went home and I told my dad all about it, and I was just, kind of full of it. And he thought I'd been drinking, and he said, go to bed, you'll feel better in the morning. And so I remember going to bed that night and thinking, gosh, I thought I knew something about you, Jesus, but I don't. But I'm really, ready to kind of trust you. I feel like, this is a continuation, really. I feel he kind of found me again. And
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. And what about for you, Nick?
Well, it's interesting because I had no faith background, and my parents had mixed up. My father wasn't at all a believer at the time, and my mum had been a Catholic in terms of upbringing, but she definitely renounced it, I think, when they got married. So our house just it didn't have any Christian input to it, and my friends at school, there were a couple of them were starting to talk about Jesus, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. What? And I kind of got to listen and got involved and went obviously to church with one of them. And over the probably a year or more, just went to churches and just tried it out for myself. And one Easter Sunday, I went to a local Anglican church, and there were only about half a dozen, 10 believers, I think, in the congregation. And yet, that was the point at which I made a step of faith. And it was quite remarkable, really, that from that background, that I could come to faith. It was fantastic. And it was some years later that I went up to Manchester and started started going out with Natalie, really, properly.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. So, what strikes me as you shared that, but also from the introduction, was like perseverance, resilience, like staying power, like the length of time that you've been married, the length of time that you've been faithful, the length of time that you've been at the same church, which is Ivy. Like, how has your faith kind of evolved to help develop that type of perseverance over the long haul?
Good point.
I think for me, it's just knowing that Jesus is with you all the time. God is with you all the time, and I think there are many times when you or I have felt it's been very difficult to persevere. Whether it's kind of in a marriage, no matter how good that marriage is, there are always times when it's difficult, and with church, and I just feel that God is always there with an answer. Jesus is always, that there's something in either in his teaching, or there's something that he touches your heart with that changes you. And I know if I've ever prayed for anything, so there's been difficulties in marriage, and I've assumed it's all Nick's fault. So I've prayed about it, and I've been really surprised that I'm the one who God's changed. And the same with any kind of long-term things. There are always the ups and downs. And I think the lovely thing about going to Ivy Church is that it's always been a church on the move. Really, it's always been moving. So we've never felt it's been right to leave. Really, it's felt that this is where God's called us, and that's the most important thing, really, to be where you feel he wants you to be.
Anything to add to that, Nick?
No, much the same. I must confess, in the middle years, if you like, I spent a lot of time away from home. I was working, so I had to be in mostly in this country, admittedly, but I was away for big chunks of the week, home at weekends. And the weekend, therefore, became a mountain of stuff that had to be done, jobs that had to be done. And those days, for instance, we had washing machines that didn't work very often. And so I would spend my Saturday repairing the washing machine and taking it apart and putting it back together and all sorts of things like that. And so the fact is that I confess there was lots of times when faith was a component of life, a part of life, but just a part, not really significant. Not a very significant part. And it was only as the years rolled on that it became more and more important, because I started to realize, hey, there's something in this. I'm not just a Christian because of a step of faith way back there, but because it's real, it's life-changing now. That was a significant difference, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I want to ask, because of your experience, I want to ask, like, how have you seen the way that churches evolved, maybe within the context of Ivy or even outside, as the years have gone on? How has your service changed, as a result, and how you've served and discipled possibly the people around you?
Go on.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of had a lot to do with age, really. So, when I was young, with young children, so it was lots of involvement with mums and other mums, my peers, really, in the church, and then looking, supporting some of the elderly lady. There was one elderly lady that we used to always visit when my daughter was a baby, and that was just such a real joy and a pleasure, and I learned so much from her. But I was just going to her home to spend some time with her and give her some support. And then there was the children's groups and children's youth groups and things like that. Just over the years, you kind of get involved with when that's your kind of that's familiar as the kids were growing up. And then there was just involvement in all sorts, lots of with lots of the women in Ivy. We used to have, we used to meet and serve there, and then we've done things like marriage prep and gosh, I can't remember now, but there's lots of things that just as they've come up, we've just felt that for a season they've been nice to be involved in, and I think that's, for me, that's always amazing, because you just are able to learn so much from each other and share so much of your life with each other, and grow.
Yeah. So there was a period when I was an elder, and that meant a good deal of involvement in that sort of area. And before that, I was quite heavily involved in the ministries through what was it called? Anyway, essentially it was the admin side of things, and that too was a big chunk of time, if you like. And then there were the various ministry opportunities. So in terms of change, I think Ivy has changed massively. It's been more charismatic in the past, with tongues and prophecy and so on as a regular part of life together. And then it's been bigger, not as big, but bigger than it is at the present. So it's always changing, and that's the stimulation of the fellowship, I think.
Yeah, sure. Great. And what season would you say that you're both in now in terms of this service and the influence you can have within the community?
Ooh.
Well, we're both retired now, so I suppose that gives us a little bit more freedom, really, to get involved with things. I think we feel very much that we're able to serve with however. So in when we were meeting together as a church, we were part of the welcome team and the prayer team and help with brews and things like that, the practical kind of things. And also I love, again, still being in touch with the women in the church, so the women's Bible study that we have on a Friday. And and different support groups, really, that are there, just there for a season and a time. I just feel that it's about supporting and being part of and encouraging and just being part of church in a very kind of, in a way where we needed, really.
Yeah, true.
Anything else to add to that, Nick?
Lots, I'm sure, but I can't really think of anything particularly.
I mean, what really strikes me is the humility that you both have in serving that way. And yet what comes with that also is this confidence as well. Confidence to know that you have something to give and something to offer. Yeah. And I think that might be different for others who, haven't really found their place. And we know that God has put something in us to use, but sometimes it's not easy to kind of express that. I see you both really confidently stepping into that, which is fantastic. Um, I didn't know, but you were an elder, Nick. Actually, that was that's great. So thank you for whenever that was and however long you did it for.
Um,
On to like what's happening today, and
yeah,
with the pandemic.
fantastic.
It's, as they say,
Sure.
an unprecedented time.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has that maybe affected you both, and how, have you responded differently because of your faith, versus somebody who maybe doesn't believe, and they might have had a different type of
Hmm.
reaction or response to this whole thing?
Yeah, good point. I, I'm not sure. We, I'm strictly speaking limited to living here in my house and the garden and not going out. I'm a vulnerable person or something. But fortunately, we have a big garden, and so we do get a fair amount of exercise out there. And we're in touch with all our neighbours up on one side of the garden is all our neighbours' gardens. So we're in touch with them, and of course, having been here a long time, we know them well, most of them, some of them particularly well. So yeah, I think it's a just constant adaptation really, and figuring out, oh crumbs, we've got to do that now, we've got to do that now, and so on. It really is fast. And the concept that God is involved is so reassuring, because I can't imagine what it must be like if you haven't any faith, to believe in somebody who is in charge of everything. It's just frightening, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
Natalie?
For me, I think at first it was quite a well. I didn't think it would last as long as, I didn't think it would be like it is now. I thought it would just be a temporary kind of thing till it was kind of all over. So, but what I felt really is that it's been enabling me to do the things I feel God's been asking me to do for a long time. So the actual kind of lockdown situation has kind of focused me, I think, really. And I feel, to live kind of more generously and not be afraid of the, things are limited and we've got to hold on to what we've got. So to live a bit more generously, to live more simply as well. I've really enjoyed that. And realise how much distraction I allow in my life, really, and how much busyness can really just take over, and so it's been great to do that. And Ivy, it's been the year of focus, so I really feel this is enabled focus that I don't think I would have done otherwise. And I think as well, I've been challenged as how to live justly as well, because with the recent campaign, the Black Lives Matter and things, it's been that's a wake-up call for me. It's like, the whole area of life I wasn't aware of, and how we kind of live more justly. So for me, it's kind of made me focus on this. I think the interaction with the neighbours has been really good, and because normally we're out and busy and doing lots of things, so that's been great to kind of have that and feel that this is our area of influence, really, is our neighbourhood.
So true, so true. Natalie, you mentioned a couple of things there would be great to pick up on. One was about living more generously, and I'm intrigued by what you meant by that, especially during this time, when we don't get to physically meet and cross paths. How are you expressing that?
Well, I think being being aware that there are families where jobs will have been lost, and so families are in difficult situations. So there are lots of kind of programs going on to help give people food, especially children. So just supporting those charities, whether it's the local food bank could do that, and also it's a similar kind of food bank thing going on in Wythenshawe, just with finances and things happening in that way. I think with the neighbours, looking out for opportunities, kind of to be generous, to share things, to kind of look out for each other, really. And so there's that area, and also, you know, kind of globally, really, where there's needs, you know, the compassion with the thinking of, we have a child that we support through compassion, and thinking, gosh, what must it be like in that's in Haiti. So we, you know, again, being aware and where we can support, whether it's with finance or encouragement and things like that. So,
So it's that outward focus, isn't it?
Yes,
absolutely.
Seeing all the need around you, being more sensitive to it.
Yeah, it'd be so easy to just reduce down to just looking at your neighbourhood and so on, and not be focused elsewhere. And it's important that we are, because it's a global world, particularly at the moment, you know, because this disease has got right the way around the world.
Sure. And then the other thing that Natalie, that you mentioned, was living justly, acting justly, you know, in the wake of the campaign and Black Lives Matter. And, you know, that is something that's triggered by this incident that happened over, you know, at near the end of May in America. And that has really caught huge momentum, another global movement campaign. What are your thoughts on that? And I don't want to get too deep into it, but in terms of acting justly, like, what have you noticed? What have you learned? What have you understood? How will it change the way you act?
Yeah, I think probably what I've understood is just what life is like for a lot of my friends and people, you know, of colour who have, you know, experienced something that I haven't. So I take. I don't understand how life has been for them, and so that's been a real, you know, kind of quite shocking, really. And I've thought, I didn't know that it could happen. You know, people having experienced prejudice from being children, really, and how that, you know, the impact of that and how that colours their thinking of themselves and the barriers that they have to overcome. So, and I don't think I was really aware of that. I knew, you know, we were all different, but, you know, I didn't realise it had such an impact. What I do, I think it's opened up my understanding more, and what I do about it, I'm still kind of finding that out, I think. I know, you know, there are some instances that I'm thinking, how do I respond to, you know, how do I speak up, really? How do I say things that will influence others, really, when I know their attitudes are perhaps different from mine, and they do have a different, you know, quite maybe a prejudice. And what do I say in those circumstances? How do I just, without starting a huge confrontation or an argument or something, but how do I introduce the fairness of it and the justness of it into a conversation is what I think at the moment. But where that will lead, I don't know. It's the start of a journey for me.
Thanks, Natalie. What about yourself, Nick?
Well, much the same, really. It's essentially because we're the colour we are, we've obviously very limited experience. But when you talk to people and you listen to people and realise how powerful the prejudice has been and still is for many of them, you realise that you've just got to take stock and be sensible about how you're speaking and think about, really in a deeper way, just how you must be coming across to people. Um, yeah, I mean, we've neighbours here who, yeah, and they're new to the locality, and it's important that we listen very carefully to them and just understand them more fully. Yeah,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's great. It's great answers there. Thank you. And it is something that's it's an ongoing conversation, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, absolutely.
That understanding and starting with that listening has been a real kind of key thing for people to focus on first.
Yeah,
Great. Well, I've got one last kind of question for you both, and
okay,
that's looking forward, really.
yeah,
In the midst of everything that's going on, and I guess with even the way that we're doing church has shifted over the last 3 months. We've gone online more regularly and consistently than ever before.
mm,
COVID, we're battling against the virus, winning. I could say, it's heading in the right direction. What do you want to see, or what do you foresee happening? In terms of how we continue to do church, in terms of how you both serve and express your faith, and be faithful to the kingdom, and amongst all of this change.
only small questions then.
Only small questions, just
Uh,
finish off with.
yes, I'm just gonna. I am looking forward to the relaxation to the point where we can hug our grandchildren again. That would
Mm,
be fantastic. But there's possibility of us having to face another peak in October, November time. So you just think, if until we get a vaccination, and a good vaccination, obviously one that really works, and it's going to go global, so it'll be huge numbers. Um, I, I just think we've got to be. I've got to be so careful. Um, but in terms of faith, I think, yeah, I think more of this seeking after um, God and seeking after local contacts and people that we meet, and just sharing. More and more of that, I think, is the key to the next few months, really. Yeah.
mm,
For me, I, I, I'm not sure I know what it's going to look like, really.
Yeah.
What church is going to look like, but I hope that we keep some of the things that we've already started. I love the things like the faith lifts and that communication that's readily available, really,
Yeah.
with church. And so it's not just, so church isn't just kind of some day that we meet, and then maybe the grow groups and things like that once in the week, that it's a more fluid kind of relationship amongst us all. I'm not sure, really.
And the other thing that's interesting is that since Steve Small's been involved with partners, we've now moved to a video chat or like this, and okay, we've been doing that twice a month, but it's interesting that potentially could grow massively, and I trust it will, because they're fabulous people, and they're well worth getting a deeper understanding of just how they're working and who they're talking to, and so on and so on, because they're really important people, and people in the fellowship as well, in our community.
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? In one way, you're disadvantaged because you get to meet less frequently physically, but
Yeah.
in another way, it's pushed us to use technology, meaning that we can actually have more interaction,
Yeah.
although it's virtual. You
Yeah.
can't get
Yeah.
the hugs in,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you
No.
still have the communication available.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure, great.
Yeah, so hope it'll be a good mix of the two, really.
Yes,
Physical meeting
yes.
and
Yes, that's what I'm hearing from you,
communication.
Natalie. It's like we want to retain some of the things that
Yeah.
are precious and maybe needs to happen, or
Mm.
we don't lose some of that,
Yeah.
while still also trying to move forward as well.
Mm.
It's great. Thank you both so much
Oh,
for
you're
taking the
welcome.
time. I've loved getting to know you both individually and as a couple more closely during this short interview. I thank God for you both. May God continue to bless you in your service and in your faith, and may you continue to have the influence that you've been having over the last few decades. May there be more of that to come. So thank you both.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
thanks for all that you do as well.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you.